Well, we're not here to talk about Gogglebox today. We're here to talk about creativity versus process in marketing leadership from your point of view as a global senior director of marketing at WEX.
Yes.
So, welcome to the FINITE Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was cold morning.
Yes, very cold. -5 degrees when I woke up.
Oh, gosh.
Not good. So why don't we start by you telling me a bit about your background in marketing, how you got into marketing, and maybe something about your role today.
Yeah, so I'm one of those weird marketeers. I've always loved it. So I sort of found it at a very young age. And actually, I only realised this when I've reflected back talking to my parents later on in life. They're like, you were never interested in the programme. You're only interested in the adverts. How strange is that? That's so weird. And I knew I was coming to see you, so I thought I must tell you that. And then I studied music, very creative, but with process. So what was quite interesting about discipline is you could be very creative, but if you've ever studied classical music, it's still quite process driven as well in the way that it's built together. And then I rolled into university doing sort of business studies with music, but I added on marketing and I just loved it. And those sessions. And ever since, I've been working in marketing from a very young age. And I have had the privilege, actually, of working with some great UK brands. So Sainsbury's, HSBC, and now WEX, which is a different challenge. And WEX is great because it's given me a string to my bow where it is a great and becoming a great household name in the US, but very unknown in EMEA and APAC. But it's a marketeer's dream to work on, because you have the structure, the company, the funding, but a brand that no one knows. So what a great brief for someone who loves marketing to work on. And that's who I am today.
Awesome.
For WEX's marketing challenges.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting that you were interested in ads as a kid. I always think there's something sociological about them as well. It's not just like brands selling to people. It's also preservation of culture. I don't know. There's a lot more to 100%. It than just. And they're just getting better and better, right?
Yeah.
All the ads that I see today, like their own cinematic masterpieces in themselves.
Yeah. In a way, we've kind of got quite excited, I think, as a culture to do something. And I the advent of social, people being more conscious about image, rightly or wrongly. For some reasons, obviously, that isn't the right thing to be that conscious. But I think just production values as well have gone up, over the last couple of decades. And you notice that, I think, in some of the marketing. So it's risen the bar, really, I suppose, from a marketeer's perspective to just where you need to be creatively and from a sort of quality perspective. And I think, creativity is an interesting one because in theory, it should be infinite. But often when marketing as a profession, 50, 60 years now, so sort of post-World War II boom, a lot of ideas have been done. So you've got to find new ideas, new innovative ways, creative ways to essentially deliver on some of the same briefs that we've had for years, which is engaging people in our products, services, brands, institutions, alike. So yeah, I love it, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Exciting for me.
Great. And that's why technology is such a good lever as well, because that changes and that makes everything more fast-paced, more easy. So there's a lot of ways we can utilize that. This is a good segue into a recent campaign that you told me about on our first introductory call.
Yes.
And I wanted to start the conversation with this originally because I just think it's so inspiring, and I think a lot of our listeners will gain a lot from it in terms of creative process and creativity versus process. So could you let me know, do you remember what that was?
I do. So financial Christmas is like January, February. So you find a lot of retailers obviously on the lead up to Christmas. Most financiers are on the lead up post Christmas to try and support people. So we've called it Big Start as our campaign, and it's all about helping customers fuel simplicity. We're in the business of helping customers drive discounts and sort of, benefits to their haulage companies, or if you're a B2B customer with any vehicles and you need to purchase fuel, either old school fuel or new school EV fuel. So we really wanted to spend the time thinking, how do you take what is finance, which is not necessarily people's top of mind, exciting category to work on. Haulage or transport, which again, sometimes you think, oh, how exciting is that? And kind of just have a bit more fun with it, and say, actually, there are fun things you can still do in marketing, regardless of the category, regardless of the industry, regardless of the topic. And I kind of believe, in a way, that is the marketing task, is to make something that maybe isn't understandable or relatable and understandable, and bring it into culture, bring it into people's lives, try and work out how you do that. Now, if you've ever worked in finance or somewhere that's quite strict on the way that you do marketing, you are always up against process, because it has to be communicated in a certain way. You have to make sure that you're living and breathing some of the values that consumers would expect, of course, from marketing. We have to be good stewards of that as well, particularly when it comes to finances, and you would expect that as a consumer. How do you still make it relatable and fun and bring that creativity in? So we've had so much fun on this latest campaign. And in fact, some of the things that we've tried to do is think about the unexpected things and just see, we have looked through every B-reel, every blooper, everything that we did and captured, and try to sort of build that in. And rather than see it as the waste of the marketing that you don't use or doesn't fit the process, how do you bring it into the forefront and say, actually, that was really fun. We enjoyed doing it. We think people are going to enjoy watching it. Push against a little bit of the process and put that out there and see what people think about it, really.
Awesome. So the mindset going in was to have fun with it. What was the original concept, and where did the bloopers come from? Did they come from you trying to be quite like stale and rigid, or?
In a way, yes, because I think we wanted to make sure that we had got all the key points across. Some of our stakeholders are really keen that we, position the product in a certain way. And when you try and do that and you try and stick to a script, inevitably humans aren't able to do that anyway. I mean, if you've ever seen the production of, a cinematic film, there's 1,001 moments where it goes wrong. But some of those moments are where creativity happens, in the unexpectedness of the pieces that we work on. So it's recognizing that, actually, and in the mindset of when you're building, to say, do you know what? We may walk into building this campaign with only 90% of the answers. We don't have to have understood it all. It scares people that it isn't 100%. It scares stakeholders, it isn't 100%. It scares finance that you haven't, got it. You do get, but creativity comes from some of that unknown, unexpectedness. It comes from the places where you're not already looking. And I think what's the important part is when you're looking back and then picking out the final edits, is understanding that and understanding what humans would connect with. We are all humans, whether we work in B2C, B2B, etc. And what was profound for me as I was looking through some of the edits was some of the moments where it went wrong or not too script, if you want to call it that. I hate the word wrong, really, but when it's not too script,
happy
accidents, you're right, were some of the ones that made me smile the most. And I went home that night and I just thought, these are the moments where I smiled, where I elicited a response, where I felt, I felt something when I watched that. They're the bits we have to get in, because that's the job at the end of the day for marketeers, is to connect with people.
Cool. And so I'm noticing a lot of themes here, like authenticity, honesty, humanity. And you said it's about connecting. I guess that is correlated with resonance.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is important now? Have brands who have done this in the past always been successful, or do you think it's more important for B2B brands especially to bring in those themes into their marketing?
Yeah, and we as marketeers, we're bombarded with different schools of thought. Our agency partners, the likes of Byron Sharp and Aaron Bird Bass, and if you read every different book you have, and for a lot of that is true, and there is a formula, and it should be formulaic. There are some practices that are just, it is true. The more reach, the more frequency that you have, the more that you drum, it will become habitual. And some of those things are just nature in the way that humans operate. But there are very few things in life now, because of how often we've done that I think really kind of touch the heart and the soul. And it's working through, how do you still make those heart and soul connections in a world that is asking us to be more formulaic. And interestingly, it came up in a conversation recently around AI. And, as most businesses, we're on the AI drive too. As most marketeers, we're trying to understand AI and how we use it. In many cases, we've been using elements of machine learning and everything for a very long time in marketing. But it's still, how do you utilize tools, the technology, the AI that's coming, and still make a heart and soul connection that kind of resonates with people? And it's difficult to do, and it's hard to plan. And I think the only advice I'd give to people is, try not to plan it, try to spot it when it happens unexpectedly, and then bottle that. Because you have to then, as you're going through your career, your campaigns, whatever work you're doing, try and embrace the moments where it's unexpected, and then see how that goes. Because that's where I think you'll start making those heart and soul connections.
That's awesome advice. And yeah, it really aligns with that case study that you mentioned, or that campaign that you mentioned, because those bloopers were accidental. They weren't manufactured. It wasn't, you're not some big corp who was hiring actors to act silly behind the scenes. That's awesome. That brings me to my next question, actually, or one of the questions that I had about this manufacturing of creativity and this kind of like cookie cutter or box set that maybe is rightly sold by agencies who do it really well, and creative teams. What do you think? Like, do you think it's possible to get that kind of authenticity from process and planning, or do you think it always has to have that twist and turn? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think all of us want creativity in marketing. We all want it, I think. There's very few of us that would say we don't want to be creative. What I think we don't necessarily understand is what creativity means to the end consumer and how they experience creativity. And if you can plan that and it works and elicits those responses, then great. There's no kind of hierarchy of creativity that says this is good creativity, this is bad creativity. The dynamic of creativity is that it is creative. I mean, and that's the fun part of it. But in my experience, most of the best creatives have come from unplanned creativeness, because it comes from a place, they come from blind spots that we have. They come from areas that we haven't thought of. You see it through all of history, whether you look at fashion, whether you look at house architecture, anything like that. A lot of things come from, mistakes, errors, by chance, cutting the cloth the wrong way. And then you end up finding that becomes a fashion trend. Or, these are places where creativity comes from. And the hardest bit of all, because it's unplanned, is embracing that creativity. Because when you plan creativity, it's what your mind sees as the creative route. When it's unplanned, your brain diverts to saying, well, that wasn't what I wanted. Well, no, it isn't what you wanted, but it could be the gem that you were looking for. And it's trying to take a step back when you're kind of looking and reviewing those things and just saying, are we onto something there? And how does that work? And, you could take an approach of testing it within an inch of its life if you want to. And in many cases, a lot of us in marketing now are, have super close relationships with our finance partners. We have to be delivering the results. People want to know the tangibility of marketing. And all those things are true. And we should absolutely deliver those in the marketing profession. We do have an accountability back to our business stakeholders to show output. But we should always keep true the art and the creativity of marketing, and try and let that and give it some air. Give the 10% some air to see what we can.
Awesome. I feel like you're reading my mind. Every question that I have in my head, you just get to. Maybe you should just run the podcast yourself. Yeah, just do a monologue.
The Jamie show.
Happy accident. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the Jamie show. That's amazing. Yeah, I was gonna talk about that, like stakeholder management. How easy is it to convince stakeholders in these big corporations to kind of ease up a bit and let you have that 10% freedom?
Yeah, I mean, and the short answer is it isn't easy. Quite rightly, business partners, finance partners, they want to, they understand costs, investment. They're very good at what they do. They don't understand marketing. And I think that's where we have a role as marketeers to play in educating our business stakeholders around the role of marketing, how we add value, what does that value look like, what forms does it come in. What I tend to do, I do a bit of a litmus test with a couple of my stakeholders, and I find it really useful to send to their mind, because if you remember, there's meetings all day, they've got other things, accounting, all this sort of good stuff that they have to do. I give them, I did this actually 2 weeks ago as we came back from Christmas, one of my stakeholders, with the campaign. I gave them 2 seconds to answer the question, give me a watch brand name. You got 2 seconds to answer me. And then they give me a name. And it's a well-known name that you'll see at most sporting events is the one that came out. And I said, why was that? Well, I don't know. I said, that was because of people like me in a room positioning that brand in a way that gave it the top of mind awareness, where when I'm pushing you to make a decision, that's what you've selected. Well, that's what we want for our brand too, right? So that's the job we're trying to do. Now, if you bring it to life for them as if they're in the consumer world, they get it 100% because they're subject to the work that we're doing day in, day out. So it often takes you as a marketeer to center the mind of your stakeholders in the job to be done and the job that we are doing. So rather than go to them and ask them, do you think the hat should be green or blue? Or even give them the opportunity to comment on that, center their minds around the job to be done and why that's going to add value and create value for the business. And I would do that in most conversations you have. Center them at the beginning and allow yourself then to go into the art and science of marketing and how it's going to add value.
Wow, a very creative approach to stakeholder management. Yeah, that's great. I'm sure a lot of our...
Or a process, if you do it every time. They're probably bored with me now.
Yeah,
with my questions. Is he going to do this again to me before we start the meeting?
They're like preparing brands, like, right, I'm going to say that brand to Jamie next time in the meeting.
Yeah. He's going to ask for a brand.
Oh, funny. Okay, so I want to switch this internally, inverse it to your own team. How many people are in your team?
We've had a great run this year, actually. We've needed marketing in spades across the business. So we started with 4 people at the beginning of 23. We're now up to 29 across EMEA and APAC. So still quite small in relative terms to other things, but we're making headway and adding value back. And I think testament to that is we have focused a lot on the effectiveness of marketing, which has given us a license to grow in other areas and be more creative, because we've got the effectiveness bit in a more solid ground, and it's allowed us to kind of then expand that and say, okay, well, now we know that it works. Of course it does, but now we know that. Let's take the license to be a bit more creative in some of the work that we do. So
awesome. And do you kind of infuse that mentality in the onboarding process, or do you how do you have your team working through process and you identifying those points, or do you kind of empower them to identify those creative moments themselves?
Yeah. So for me, and it sounds obvious when you give the answer, it is all in the hiring. Whenever you're building teams, it's all about getting the right people. And I have seen it and witnessed it 100 times where people have just hired people like themselves, or you walk into agencies and it is the same type of person across the board. It is literally the cookie cutter of people hiring, and they've hired people like them. And the problem when you do that as a leader is you naturally build in one way of thinking into your team. And when you're hiring, and I've had the benefit and the beauty of building a team out rather than inheriting a legacy team. But when you do that and you build out, or even if you're making structural changes to your team, you have to build in from the start diversity of thought. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to tick all the diversity boxes. Although HR, we're very pleased with you, obviously, if you do. And we should have a diverse workforce, I would say. But diversity of thought and the way people look at the world does often come from different cultural backgrounds, different countries, etc., etc. But you should build that in, because what then happens within your team is you don't necessarily need the process to try and mandate diversity of thought out. You will get it because of the people that you've hired. And we've been very lucky. I mean, we've hired individuals from all over Europe, culturally different from all over the world. I have lots of people in my APAC team that are diverse across Asia, and they come with lots of diversity of thought. The same within Europe as well, and particularly from other cultures outside of Europe, bringing that into London. And I think that what that does is it creates a natural tension of thought. So when someone does something, someone else will comment or talk or come to the debate and say, oh, but my culture and the way I do things, or how this element of society, and you naturally then, oh, that's an amazing idea. Yeah, why don't we run with, or why don't we try? And the reason why I wholeheartedly believe in that is because we're serving society, and our teams should mirror the society that we serve. So it's really important to make sure in marketing you have that diversity of thought, that diversity built in from the start, because that naturally creates creativity without you having to force it.
Awesome. And it's clear from your response that from a leadership perspective, what comes with that diversity of thought is also respect of this thought and ownership as well, allowing people that space to take their ideas and run with them and not getting so bogged down in the process.
Yeah, and it's a bit of an unfair statement to say that process kills creativity, but in some ways it does. But it's very much needed because you also don't want the Wild West, and you want to have an element of control. You have to deliver stuff back to stakeholders. You need to be clear on your runways and stuff. Yeah. So you do need an element of process, but it's getting that balance right where you have understood when the process has killed the creativity, and just being conscious of that as you balance those two things.
And it's almost like process comes when you get it right. If you do it right, you need to do it again. Make it a process, continue with it, still play with it, but that's when it starts to become more desired as a marketer. They want to fill their day with things that they know they've created in that work. Yeah,
I mean, a good example of that is last year we were expected really to sort of turn around in 8-week cycles. And I've pushed very hard to say the team needs 12-week cycles. And everyone can't understand why. Well, why do you need 4 more weeks? What are you talking about? You're mad. We won't get as much done is the sort of phrase. And I said, no, but it will make for a better piece of work. So if you give people and you build in the time for creativity, it will come then from somewhere in that process. It may come on the morning that they're on the way to the office, or I like to do a lot of train thinking as I'm sort of staring aimlessly out of the window, and things come that just wouldn't have come if you're up on the time pressure. So you have to kind of make space for creativity as well.
Let's push back against hyper productivity. Revolution.
The take out of this podcast, Jamie says, just take as much time as you need. Everyone's going to get fired.
That's why I'm taking a 2-hour break today. It was Jamie's fault. 2 hours,
think about it. Well, the flip side of that is actually sometimes giving yourself pressure also creates creativity.
This is true.
So, it comes from different places. Yeah. It can work under pressure. Some of my best work has happened when I'm at the 11th hour thinking about stuff. And some of it has come from having the benefit of time. But I think that's the beauty of creativity. It doesn't always come when you plan it to.
Sorry to package everything up here, but we need diversity of thought and diversity of method in that case. Yeah,
awesome. Flexibility.
Exactly. Cool. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the episode. It just flew by. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and hear from you.
You too.
Is there anything final that you want to say to inspire others to be creative?
Have fun. We're only here we're only here once on this planet, and if you work in marketing, you have one of the best jobs in the company. So have fun with it as well as delivering the results that you need to. But it's really important to enjoy yourself while you're doing it.
Awesome.